Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Sharon Bonney. I'm the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and I'm delighted to welcome you to our webinar today, Helping Your Adult Learners Beat Test Stress, which we know so many of them really do deal with this stress. So I am going to turn this over to Essential Education, the proud sponsor of this webinar. They've been a wonderful partner to Cowave into the field of adult education, and they're sponsoring this webinar, so it's free of charge to our members. Dan?
Thanks, Sharon. Appreciate that. We always love the opportunity to sponsor these webinars and work with Cowave closely. Thanks, everybody, for being here today. Great on a Friday afternoon to see so many people who have logged in to see this webinar and to get some support in that area. We do offer one product that I think would really be an interesting connection here, which is our Smart Skills book. And there are 6 sections in it, from Think Smart, Plan Smart, Learn Smart, Feel Smart, Test Smart, and Answer Smart. You can get a sample of that if you'd like to see how that book is put together at essentialed.com/educators. And when you get there, you'll find all the different links to our different resources. And in the print materials, you can find the sampler of Smart Skills that you can download and print and try out with students and see what you think. We appreciate the opportunity to support Cowave through these webinars and to work with you in the field. We know the work you're doing is really critical, and have just been amazed at the way adult educators have adjusted their teaching and their times and their efforts to meet the needs of students in what are really difficult times. So our hats off to you. It's an honor to partner with you as you work to change lives of students. When I close this off here, I'll put our link in the chat box in case you didn't happen to catch it on the screen here, so that you can go there. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to email me at dan@essentialed.com, and I'll get you routed to the right person or answer questions or set up demos for you. Thank you all very much. Sharon, I'll turn it back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. Appreciate your sponsorship and partnership all these years.
Absolutely.
So with that, I just have a few quick slides to get through. After this webinar, everybody will receive a certificate of participation. It will come to you within 24 hours. The slides and resources on this webinar will also be available in the Adult Educator Repository. I want to give a shout out to Essential Education because that beautiful Adult Educator Repository was built really with funding provided by Essential Education. And not just funding, they also participated on a committee when we were developing it. So thank you to Essential Education for that as well. I also want to mention our Cowave Journal. We have with us actually our content, or one of our editors and proofers, Cynthia Campbell, is on as well. And we have this Cowave Journal. It's the resource for adult education. It focuses specifically on workforce. So this edition is available on Amazon Kindle as well as Shopify. We have some really beautiful interviews with authors that you can access as well. And just want to encourage you to have a look at that because it's written really by and for the field. Those who wrote for this edition of the Cowave Journal, many of them they've been around for so many years and doing so many exciting and innovative things. So just want to encourage you there. As well, we have our Racial Equity and Immigrant Integration edition of the journal, which will be coming out in probably an early of next year, part of next year, and articles for the Cowave Journal will be accepted until September 15th. So we felt this was a really timely edition. Also want to encourage you to and remind you to really apply for the Google grants that we have out there. Application date it ends tomorrow. So we have training opportunities at $200 as well as opportunities for local programs at $1,000. Also want to encourage you to join us for regional meetings, which will take place on Monday at 2 Eastern Standard Time every other month. You can go to our Cowave website and check the regional tab for more details. Also, our national conference, we have had 1.3 million plus page views for our national conference. We've had more than 3,000 that have registered and attended. There's lots of information on there. If you attended, you can still register your guest free of charge. You can still watch the sessions that you might have missed. And if you complete the conference evaluation, you will also receive a certificate of participation as well as a certificate with all your CEUs. So just want to encourage you to do that. As well, we're looking forward to a socially distanced conference at the beautiful and spacious Grand Ole Opry, the Gaylord. And this is going to be March 21st through the 24th in 2021, but we're also doing a hybrid. So we're going to have a virtual conference tied in with our national in-person conference. And mini grants for that will be coming out very shortly. So I just want to encourage you there as well. Also, I'd like to just remind you that we have conducted a survey of Cowave members, and we had a lot of feedback. I want to say over 1,400 people that responded and gave their input for this COVID-19 pandemic. We have resources that are available right there on cowave.org/COVID resources. And finally, I want to introduce you to today's presenter, Miss Cynthia Campbell. And I've had the pleasure of working with Cynthia personally. She's really been wonderful to work with on our journal, and she is our presenter today. So Cynthia Campbell has worked for over 25 years in education, including teaching adult ESOL and ABE classes, directing an urban adult literacy program, developing curricula, and providing professional development. Dr. Campbell has presented workshops both regionally and nationally. Locally, she serves on the Mace, Maryland board and is excited to welcome Cowave to her home state. As principal consultant for Gold Apple Services, Dr. Campbell specializes in educational program design, development, editorial support, plain language consulting, and professional development. So with that, I'm going to now open up this to Dr. Cynthia Campbell. And I just encourage you all to, if you could put your information in the chat box, say hello to her there, and then put your questions in the Q&A. So Cynthia, are you there?
Yes, I am. Do you want me to start my video? Yay. Hi, everyone. So thank you, Sharon, so much. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us on a Friday afternoon. And I just want to acknowledge that there's people from all over the country, which is marvelous. But it's good to see some Maryland folks in the house. We had looked forward to having you come to our great state, and unfortunately this year it couldn't happen because of COVID-19, but hopefully sometime you will be able to come and visit our state and eat crabs or go boating with us. So I'm here today to talk about test stress, helping adult learners beat test stress. So I'm going to share my screen so that you guys will see the presentation. Here it comes. All right, so we have, this is about helping your adult learners beat test stress. And I'm glad that a lot of you are here on this session because this is an important topic and we deal with it every day in the field, don't we? Let me see, okay, and why is it not advancing? Okay, advance. Okay, so in this workshop, we're going to be talking about how people respond to fears. We're going to talk about how test stress affects adult learners. I'm sure you all have a lot to say on that, but we're going to find out how to help your learners de-stress by changing their perspective, demystify by learning how tests work, and desensitize by building test resilience. I was really glad when I saw that Dan Griffith was saying that Essential Education has a program on helping people become successful test takers, because we don't often talk about this enough with our students. So with this workshop, you're gonna learn about how you can help adult learners combat common myths about tests, combat negative self-talk. We use a little something called the negativity monster. You'll see that in a minute. We'll be talking about what you can do before the test, what you can do during the test, what to do after a test. I also have some new material on how to manage a test on computer, because that's becoming the wave of the future, especially with COVID-19. GED will now have an option for people to online from home. So this is becoming more important than ever. And then some general testing tips. So there's just a lot of information in here and we'll get going. Okay, but first I want to hear from you. All right, so I'm going to ask you to contribute to the chat box. Sharon's going to keep an eye on it and she's going to give me some of your feedback after I share with you. But I have two questions I want you to think about. What makes you anxious? And what do you do about it? What makes you anxious and what do you do about it? All right, so I am going to share a couple of scenarios and see how we go along. I'm going to take questions. I see a couple people raise hands. I'm going to take questions at the end. So if you can put your questions in the Q&A box, and I will work on questions at the end. Okay, so I'm going to share two scenarios. The first scenario is what makes me anxious. I tell you, one thing that makes me anxious is bats. Ooh. So what do I do about it? What do I do about it? Well, in my life, I don't need to deal with bats. So I don't. I simply do not deal with bats. If I don't watch them on television, if I get close to a bat, somebody else has to take care of the bat. And one day there was a bat that showed up at our local library, and I heard about it before I went over there. I stayed home that day and waited until the bat was gone before I went to our local library. So what I did was avoid them, and I still do, because I don't need to deal with them. Scenario 2, what made my husband anxious? Okay, so this is what made my husband anxious. This is in the past tense, and this is about crossing high bridges. Now, if you live in Maryland, you know that we have the Chesapeake Bay Bridge, which is one of the biggest bridges in the country and one of the highest. And that used to be very anxiety producing for my husband. So even though he doesn't like letting me drive, if we were crossing a bridge, we had to pull over, switch drivers. I'd drive us across the bridge. Then as soon as we're across the bridge, switch drivers, and then he gets control of the car again. So he would avoid the bridges. But in the last several years, my husband has been very involved with wetland protection volunteering. So this has become, it's a passion project for him. And to get to project sites, like across the bridge to the eastern shore of Maryland, he needed to cross the bridge because I wasn't going to go with him every time. I couldn't. So he learned how to cross the bridge to get to project sites, and he now drives across the Chesapeake Bay Bridge without me all the time. Now I'm going to throw back to you. I want to find out, and Sharon's going to share with me about what are some scenarios. So what do our scenarios show us about dealing with things that make us anxious? I want to hear about some of the things that make you all anxious, because there's a lot that makes us anxious right now, isn't there? So Sharon, can you share with us about some of the things that people have shared? I'm going to check the chat. Let me look at the chat. I think Sharon didn't quite hear me, but what pandemics? Yes, pandemics. We're all dealing with a whole lot of anxiety. Kids going back to school, someone said relating to the bridge, being on stage in front of a large crowd. Actually, public speaking is one of the hugest fears. Spiders. My late stepfather was afraid of spiders. 6'4" man, and I had to kill the spiders. Viruses, running a Zoom class, feeling out of control, yes, and we've had to deal with a lot of out of control and unknown. So that's been anxiety producing for all of us. Yes, work, sleep, technology, cry for help, getting sick, and yes. So we have a lot of things that we're pretty much in touch with, a lot of things that's going on with our anxiety. Now, what I want to ask you to think about with our scenarios, what do our scenarios show about dealing with things that make us anxious? People who are late. Yes, that can make me anxious too. What do our scenarios show about dealing with things that make us anxious? Anyone? Avoidance or face it head on. I saw that. What else? We can avoid them or we can face them. And someone's got a pet tarantula. Okay, so we can deal with it or we can face it. Yes, we can deal with it or we can avoid it. So those are two major choices we have right now. So thank you for sharing those thoughts. Okay, so let's talk about adult learners and test stress. If you've raised your hand, would you be so good as to go ahead and put it in the Q&A chat? And I will be answering questions at the end of the session. So very likely your adult learners struggle with some sort of test anxiety. I tend to use the word test stress. And here's a little bit of data. It's a little hard to find data but here's a little bit. About 20 to 30%, 36% of young students have some form of test anxiety. And it does tend to be more pronounced among females and minorities. Now, among adults, and this is a holistic thing, among adults as a whole, we have about 18% have test anxiety. Now, I want you to put something in the chat. I want you to kind of give me your thought of what is the percent prevalence amongst your learners. What do you think? How many do you think? 60, 50, 100%, 75%, 75, 65, 50, 80. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of people say at least 50%. Some people say 35%, but a high number, a significant number of people. Someone asked about where I got the data from, and there were a couple of places I've got the data from. Unfortunately, I don't have it cited here, but email me later and I will help you find where I got the data from, okay? All right, so that is our estimate there. And we know that this is a problem with our learners. Okay, so here's some signs of test stress among adult learners. This won't be news to you, will it? So we see avoidance. If you want to empty a classroom and ensure that maybe half of your students don't show up on a Friday, announce a test ahead of time. And all kinds of people don't show up. It's true. They do a lot of avoiding tests. Mind going blank. I've heard a lot of students say to me, mind going blank. Nausea, heart attack symptoms. Any other symptoms? You see giving up, panic attack. Yes, you guys have got all kinds of things. One girl had a seizure. You stop using, okay, so it happens a lot, mind going blank. So we have a lot of different symptoms we see of test anxiety. So what are some potential causes? Let's talk about this. So as we know, when we're dealing with adult learners, we don't deal with a blank slate. What we deal with is people who come to us with a lot of previous experience, some of which is bad. So we see previous negative experience with tests and schooling, and we don't always know what kind of consequences were leveled at them for having failed a test. Okay, so it's those past failures weigh heavily on people. Plus, then you have some negative self-perception of their abilities. I think a lot of our learners have this negative self-perception of their abilities, partly because of bad experiences in the past and partly because of people not giving them the encouragement they need. Now, here's another one that's really important to me and I want to mention. They're mystified about the test and its implication. So when you do an intake process, we say, okay, you need to fill out this form, you need to take this test, and da-da-da-da. And they don't really know why the test is there. So it's important for us to be really clear about why we give the test. I'll tell you an example. I had one student that I worked with in an adult literacy program here in Maryland. Lady was from Egypt, sweetheart. She had, she was doing her post-test, and that was coming up, and she was really worried about it. And finally, she said to me, if I don't do well on this test, will you kick me out of the program? And I was like, no. But you see, these are the kind of things we don't know, some of those unstated fears. And then really important, and as I said, essential education is covering this, but never having been taught how to take a test. Why do the kids do well on SATs in the suburbs? A lot of times it's because they have been taught how to take a test since they were young children. They take SAT prep classes or ACT prep classes. And then we have, of course, learning differences. And again, this is data that's hard to track as to how many of our learners do have learning differences, but we suspect that there's a high number of them that do. Okay, so supporting our learners who deal with test stress. So here's a couple things I want to mention. Too often, we don't address this issue proactively, or devote that sustained training to help our learners. And we tend to minimize it, something that is a real issue for our learners. So we just say, don't worry about it. It's like being told to relax. How many of you have ever relaxed because someone said, oh, relax? It makes me more stressed and more nervous. And just telling them not to worry about it is not a big deal. Doesn't really address the underlying issues. So over the next slide, I'm going to show you about how to help learners do 3 things. 3 Ds. De-stress, demystify, desensitize. De-stress, demystify, desensitize. Friday afternoon pronunciation. Okay, so I'm giving you a little scavenger hunt. This is your scavenger hunt. You don't even have to leave your seat. But as you go through the next slides, I want you to identify the methods I use to help students de-stress by changing their perspective, demystify by learning how the test works, desensitize by building test resilience. And as I go through these things, go ahead and put your observation in the chat box as I'm presenting information. So, pop quiz on test. Now, this is something I never do, but I'm giving you a pop quiz on test. So let's see how we do. So, true or false? Tests prove how smart you are. Next one. On a standardized test, you should only answer the questions you know. You may know how to do a task, but answering a test question about that task can still be difficult. And a multiple choice test is the best way to find out if someone knows something. Let's see. Survey says, let's take a look. That's right. The test does not prove how smart or dumb a person is. It doesn't, we shouldn't just answer the questions we know. Yes, it can be difficult to answer a question about a task even if I know how to do it. And no, a multiple choice test is not the best way to find out if someone knows something. It's probably an efficient and cost-effective, but not completely effective. Okay, let's look at the next round of questions. True or false? Test anxiety is very common. Because you are sitting and just thinking, test taking doesn't take much energy. You cannot learn anything from the answers you get wrong on the test. And last but not least, you must get every question right. There you go. And yes, let's see what the answer survey says. Yes, test anxiety is very common. We just talked about that. Sometimes students feel like they're completely alone on that. Because you're just sitting and thinking, it doesn't take much energy. Well, that's false. We know how much energy is taken. You can't learn anything from the answers you get wrong on the test. That's false. And then here, you must get every question right. That is also false. But a lot of these falsehoods live in the minds of our students. So we're going to talk now about negative self-talk, and otherwise known as the negativity monster. He looks kind of nasty, doesn't he? Because he is, or she is. We'll find out. Okay, so this is an exercise you can do with yourself sometimes. This is very helpful, but it's also something you can do with your learners. And so what we want to do is and I have this in my little booklet that I'm going to share with you, but we have learners list the favorite things that your negativity monster likes to tell you. And then we encourage, if they want, to draw a picture of the negativity monster and give it a name. It's so fascinating when I've worked with students to see what they name their negativity monster and how they depict it. And then when you're done making a list, we will share some of the things our negativity monsters say to us. So I have things that my negativity monster likes to say to me, usually about my weight. Yeah, so, but there's other things that a negativity monster likes to say. So we have, negativity monsters tend to be loud, don't they? So we are going to talk about how we combat that negativity monster. We don't just talk about the nasty things the negativity monster says. We are going to show our learners how to fight the negativity monster with truth. And yes, you will get access to this presentation through the Adult Learner Resource Repository online. So Sharon can tell you a little bit about that at the end of where you find that, okay? So you show your learners how to fight the negativity monster with truth. And the best way to fight negative self-talk is with truthful, positive self-talk. So we're going to write down some truths about you. All right, let's see. So, where are some truths that I often give learners? I often give learners a boost with some truths that I can tell them because I've seen them in action. And the first one that I often share with learners is that you are brave. And the reason I say that is because it takes courage for a lot of our learners to come into our doors and try school again. Okay? So it takes a lot of guts to come through the door. Now, they probably have a lot of acquaintances or friends who sit and talk about going back to school, but they have actually come in and done it, and they are brave. And then we also affirm that they're learning and making progress. So now this is something that you want to share with them directly like this, but you also want to show them at various times how they're learning and making progress. So one way that I often do, like with writing students, is I hold on to some writing, and in a couple months, they're doing some more writing. I pull out the writing from 2 months earlier and put it next to the writing that they've just completed presently. And almost always the students go, wow, I didn't know I was making that kind of progress. And then this is important because I firmly believe this with all our learners, that they have abilities and talents to share. We need to think of our learners as people who bring assets, not in the deficit model, but bringing assets to their learning and to life. So why do I do this negativity monster? Well, it helps people identify that negative self-talk and how it holds them back. The negativity monster also helps them learn that they're not alone with this problem. They're not the only one who has a negativity monster chatting in their ears. And then learners also receive encouragement. And our cheerleading is critical because we need to counteract previous negative messages. Now, if someone says something negative to me, or if anyone hears something negative, you hear a bit of criticism today, how many times do I have to hear something positive to counteract that? At least 7 times. Because we tend to focus on that negative. Okay, all these kind of people say you do a great job, and then this one person said, oh, that was awful. And then what are you going to think about that night? So-and-so said I was awful. So that's 7 to 1, multiple times. So we may be among the very few who encourage our learners. I've seen this time and time again when I've worked with adult learners where someone will say, my husband or my wife or my family saying I'm not making any progress, this isn't worth doing. And I help give them do the cheerleading. And I even encourage our students to be communities who give each other that cheerleading and that encouragement. So that's why the negativity monster. Now we're going to talk about some strategies before the test. And this is what I like to tell students, that you want to keep in mind that preparing for the test is like preparing for an athletic competition. It is not something you do at the last minute. And it's something that you're not going to be overnight a great test taker. That's not what I'm saying. It's going to be a matter of building up that strength and endurance over time. And it takes time. That's what's aggravating to people like me who don't have patience, that things take time. And then along with learning the content for the test, what we know, along with learning the content, we need to learn the rules of the test and how to be strategic. So my example is a ball player has to bring more than skill to the game. They must know the rules and how to be strategic. with those rules. Okay. So there's some of the other things I tell students: learn as much as you can about the test, because usually especially with standardized tests, there's a certain amount of information readily available. So here are some good questions that they should consider and ask about a test as they're getting ready to deal with it. Is how much time do I get? How many questions are on the test? Are all the questions multiple choice? How many answer choices for each question? What other types of questions are there? How many questions do I need to get right to pass or move up to the higher level in your program? And this might be presented as a percentage, but still, it's knowing how many do you need to do to really truly be successful. Are all the questions worth the same number of points? This is an important consideration. Will the tests get harder as I go through the test? Will the questions get harder as I go through the test? Like on COSITs, you know how it starts out, oh, softball, and then it gets tougher and tougher as you go on. But what students also need to realize is even in that test, you don't get extra points for answering those tougher questions down the line. They're all worth the same number of points. Okay, so we talk about multiple choice because most tests use multiple choice, and there's ways of dealing with multiple choice. And here are some principles for students to know. First of all, you want to read the question carefully and choose the answer that is most clearly right. Now that's different from the perfect answer. It's most clearly right. Okay, so you have to do what's most clearly right. When you don't know the answer, see if you can eliminate one or two clearly wrong answers. Because usually there's one or two answers that are clearly wrong and you can throw them out, and then you can make a smart guess from the remaining answers. Answer every question. No answer means no chance of getting the answer right. A random guess, you just pick one, gives you a 25% chance of getting it right. 1 out of 4, better than the lottery. And then this is really critical. If you remember nothing else about teaching this to the students, or if you can teach any one thing to the students, is this: avoid overthinking and second guessing yourself. And this is really common. And this comes from people trying to make it be more sophisticated than it truly is. So if you start second guessing yourself, and this is an absolute rule I had with my students, if you start second guessing yourself, pick that first question you chose and move on. And literally, there's data that shows that when you start second guessing, and the more you spend time on second guessing and turning yourself inside out, the more likely you are to get this wrong. So you don't want students wasting time on a question. You want to encourage them, pick that first answer and move on. Don't torture yourself. Because if you spend too much time on one question and you don't answer 3 questions that are fairly easy, you're losing the game. Okay? You're not being strategic. Okay, so here's some other stuff. Pacing yourself. And this is something that's helpful to teach students about how you pace yourself. And here's a simple way of doing it. Is if you have 30 minutes to answer 60 questions, you figure out how much time do you have per question. Well, I have 30 seconds per question. Okay, so that's how much time I can allot to a question. Now, I also worked with one student where what we did is we strategized that because it was a COSIS test and there were so many time things, is as he watched his clock, he knew that he had to hit question 10 by 10 minutes in, or whatever it was, but we set kind of a time frame as to when where he should be at what time frame in the test. Okay, for reading passages, I encourage students to read the questions first, see what kind of questions they are, and then use them to plan your reading to find the answer. And think about what type of question it is. We're going to talk about the different kinds of question. Okay. If a math question seems hard at first, you want to take a breath and look again to see what it's really asking. It may be simpler than you first thought. And what I often I tell students is, you want to do X does not equal impossible. Okay, I saw somebody have a question about the CASA's goals test, and I don't truly know the answer to that. That's one that you probably want to look at it and see if, so you probably want to look at what the test administrators say, okay? All right, the math question, so X is not equal to impossible. That's an important thing to convey to students. And then on a math question, if your answer doesn't match any of the choices, read the problem again to make sure you understand what's asked. Oops. Okay, so here are the main types of reading questions that on a multiple choice test that students need to be aware of. The first one is what's called the main idea. And it may use other words like main purpose, main point, but it's really under identifying the overall point of the reading. And the best places to look are often in the first and last paragraphs to get the overall point of the reading. What is the overall point of the reading? Okay, then there's detail. And some people call this the go fetch question because you need to find a specific detail. You know, how many birds were in the tree in this passage? So you go through and you scan for keywords such as birds and tree and look and see how many birds were in the tree. And then you find that, and that's the answer. Inference. Okay, this can be tricky, but you have to identify a logical conclusion, something that makes sense from what the author has written. And if you feel stumped, you can always start with eliminating those clearly wrong answers and making a smart guess. Don't go crazy. And then use of word. This passage will ask you about the meaning of a word used in the passage, and often it will not be the most common use of the word. So this is where it helps to teach multiple meaning words to our students and know how certain words get used technically. Okay, so test rules for some other kinds of questions. We'll go through this briefly. We have fill in the blank, identifying the best word to make sure it fits. True, false. It's another true, false is another one where you don't overthink. Okay. Yes, often answer choice, often use synonyms. Yes. And essay in short answer, making sure you understand the question, organizing ideas and write, and checking spelling, grammar, and punctuation as best you can, watching your time. Just planning well for essays. So some word before the test tips. So first of all, we want learners to understand. We have to adjust our perspective on the test. When the test may measure some of your knowledge, it doesn't measure your value or worth. And this is what's really important. It does not measure your value or worth. And then here's another thing. Find practice questions that are like the test you will take and practice with them. The more you practice, the more comfortable you will get. For very important tests like NHS high school equivalency or driver's license test, you want to practice at least 2 or 3 times a day. But one of the things I often do with students, and I almost always want this, and I will give them the choice, and I say, would you like to do a dress rehearsal? Now, I will give them a full-length practice test. And what's nice about doing a full-length practice test with students is that they have a chance to, you have a chance to observe their behavior as they're doing this. And you can find out, oh, how they're getting nervous or what they're doing. But it also gives them a chance to actually debrief on answers and what happened to them as they took the test. And often they'll go, oh, I did that second guessing. Okay, here's some more before the test tips. We try to encourage students to get a good night's sleep the night before, get some rest. Don't break up with the girlfriend, the boyfriend, or the family in the days before the test. Try to avoid that kind of stress. Eat a reasonable breakfast beforehand, take a snack if you're having a long test, have your needed supplies ready to go the night before, including the photo ID. Yes, you've got to make sure people have their photo IDs. That was always a challenge. And then during the test, you want to arrive a few minutes early to get settled. You want to keep a picture in your mind of doing well. Dress up a little more, just a bit to feel more confident. You notice today I'm in COVID formal. I am not in a scrunchy t-shirt. I'm not in super shorts. I dressed up a bit because I wanted to be prepared. Helps me feel better giving this presentation with you all. Find a way to track your time. There may be a wall clock. You may be able to wear a watch depending on what it is, and read the directions carefully. Okay. And then during the test, you want them to remind themselves of what they've been learning, how they're making good progress. And then if they start to feel stressed, remind them of their truths. Okay, so keep those truths around, and it's not just, you want to hold on to those truths and keep them around. And if a question looks really hard, take a couple deep breaths and take another look. It may look clearer on the second round. And then remember, the goal is to get as many answers right as possible, not to get them all right. So there's some questions, there's almost always going to be a question that you're not going to be able to get right. And your best bet on those kinds is to mark a good guess, flag it if you have time to come back to it, and move on and get as many questions right as possible. Pace yourself. Don't spend too much time on any one question. Okay, some questions are not worth it. Mark questions you want to look at again. If you have time at the end, go back and check, but don't second guess yourself. If your hand starts cramping, relax and stretch. And if you have breaks, stand up and stretch. Don't just keep sitting. That's really important for blood flow to the brain. And then after a test, congratulate yourself on doing the test. Many people don't have this courage to face those tests, but you do. Do something nice for yourself, whether it's like getting ice cream or what. For me, it's ice cream. It's ice cream. But do something nice for yourself. And later, not that day, later, if you have a chance to read over the test, which you may or may not, try to learn from the wrong answers. If you need to learn something more, make a plan. Keep practicing those test strategies. So what about tests on computer? Now we're getting into a whole new thing. And so things get a little trickier on computers. So there are some general tips. So first of all, find out if the computer test will allow you to go back and check questions at the beginning of the test. The GED does. So you can tag those. You can also, if it does, you learn how to mark those questions so you look at it again. See if the computer has a timer to help you know how much time you have. Decide if you want it on your screen or not. Often computer tests will give you a choice about these things. It just depends on the computer test. Find out if you can have scratch paper or a whiteboard. Some of them will allow you that. GED allows in certain circumstances, not on the home test, by the way, but if you go to a testing center. If you can choose, take the test on a computer, not a tablet. Use a mouse, not a trackpad. Much easier to maneuver, okay? And then if you can take a practice test on computer, do so as many times as you can. So I always found it to be a worthwhile investment to get the practice tests, like, you know, the GED ready practice tests, or even ones that are like GED ready, to have those on hand. So those are just really helpful. Okay, if you're not used to writing on computer, you want to start learning how to type. So you want to help your students find a good free typing programs. There's lots of them out there. Get them to start going on that. Practice writing on the computer. I've had students where I've got them set up on their first email and start them trying to dialogue with people on email. Okay, and then take free computer skills classes. Here in Baltimore, in the Baltimore area, the Enoch Pratt Free Library, at least before COVID, had a great set of free classes for people on computer, anywhere from here's how to use a mouse to how to do Excel. Okay, free computer classes, and you can ask your program to help you find a class, and not only are you getting ready for a test, you are building work skills. Sometimes you get a little certificate and you can get work skills. Okay, all right, let's see. Other tips, as you practice, as you study for tests, you want to picture yourself doing well on the test. You want to keep those truths written down to fight the negativity monster. And again, find cheerleaders for your life. And we're helping students, encourage them to find instructors or other students who can be cheerleaders for each other. So when you have a bad day, you have someone who can remind you. because the negativity monster can get loud when you're under stress or you're tired, and then you do need your cheerleaders. As you study, you should take a stretch break every half hour or so. Find fellow students to study with and get a support system. Learn some relaxation strategies. Breathing exercises help. Reading, always reading's good. Reading books that interest you and build your vocabulary. And if anxiety continues to be overwhelming, don't be afraid to seek help from a professional. So this is something that professionals can help with. And so you might have a student where you've done a lot of this kind of stuff with and all that, and the anxiety is still too overwhelming. It may be time for you to encourage some more professional support for that student beyond what you can do, okay? Because there are students who do fall into that category where despite everything you do and all that kind of stuff, it's still something they have not yet been able to manage. Okay, and it is a real problem, so we shouldn't minimize it as a real problem. Okay, so let's see. What did you find in your scavenger hunt? What strategies help students de-stress, demystify, desensitize? I'm going to take a look and see what some things. Okay, so you are. I know I kind of distracted you with this whole discussion about the GED in-home tests. Then this was at Cowave where I learned that they are not allowing them to do whiteboards at home, but they may be changing that, so you can see. Okay, so anything, let's see what you've learned about de-stress, exercise, knowledge equals less anxiety, practice, demystifying, learning about the test so you're not unsure. How many questions do I have to write? Yes. Cheerleaders, desensitize, demystify. Find out about the questions. Yes. Positive self-talk. Okay. Good. All right. And yes, this whole presentation and the sample booklet will be available on the adult education resource page. Okay. Desensitize. Considering the facts about the test. Yes. Information is often really helpful, and demystifying something can really help make it less stressful. Okay, so here's some things we did to de-stress, negativity monster, understanding that the test measures some knowledge, but not the worth of a person, and affirming their skills. Demystifying, we talk about discussing with the student what to expect at the testing situation, help them plan how to handle the stressful parts of the test, explain to the extent possible the nature of the test and its purpose. As soon as you can, share the score. The students often want to know that score as much as they can. And what you do is, I often shared it as part of an overall evaluation at the end of the term. So they talked about the test scores. And remember that test scores, I wish that this was life, that I would, yeah, like straight up and always, but it's more like a mountain, up and down, up and down. So it's not going to be perfect linear progress. Oh, if only life were that easy, right? Okay, so desensitize. I saw someone had a question there. So desensitizing is building that stress resilience, and desensitizing is getting less stressed and less nervous about it by repeated helpful exposure. So practice opportunities, short spells, dress rehearsal, teaching and reteaching the strategy. So you don't just teach in one session, you reteach. Using the truths, teaching de-stressing techniques for going through the test, but giving people the opportunity to do practice questions on a regular basis. Okay, now I want to ask you one thing that you will do now to help your learners manage test stress. Let's see what answers you can put in the chat box. And yes, failure is not final. Okay, what's one thing that you're going to do to help your learners? Negative monster activity. Yeah, I love doing that. Practice test questions every time. Yeah, that's one of the things I did. Positive self-reinforcements practice. Review the test format. Cheerleading. Okay, more cheerleading. Encourage them to take practice. All of the above. I like that. Negative monster. Okay, good. So I'm glad that you do have some plans. I am watching the time to make sure that I have time to answer questions and the like. Let me just go over a couple of things in the next few slides for you. So I want to share with you that I created a little booklet called Beating Test Stress, and it's designed for adult learners. You have a sample that I've sent out to you, and I'm going to try to show you a sample in a second, a little bit of what it's about. But you can order a reproducible booklet customized for your program, and I'm going to see what we can find. So in this case, if you look at this slide here, for Cecil College here in Maryland, they ordered the book. I was able to put their logo on the front page. On the back page, there's some information from Cecil College. They use this with their students. Once I gave them the PDF, they could run off as many as they want. Yeah, it's really a good deal. Here's another example of someone I did this for West Virginia, and it was on inside on cover on page 2. There was some information from West Virginia Adult Ed. They use it throughout their state. Now, meanwhile, I'm going to try to show you a little bit more of the book, if I could do this. And I want somebody to, okay, let me know in the chat box if you can see the booklet. Can you see the booklet? You see my PDF? Yes, thank you. Appreciate that. So this is the front 2 pages. It's a PDF. And you can see that throughout the book, this is ready to be reproduced. You can, students can fill this out. They can use this. They can hold on to it. They can reread it. They can do the negativity monster in the book. So this is a little booklet. You asked about the cost. It's around $100 for me to customize it and send it to you. Okay, so it's a good deal. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the PowerPoint, hopefully smoothly, yay, and from current slide. So I'm going to, here's my email address. It's cmcampbell@goldappleservices.com. I'm going to put it in the chat box for you, but I'm now ready for questions and answers. So Sharon, do you have questions for me to address from the?
Sure do. So one question is, any advice on what to tell students who have taken a HSC test twice, in addition to multiple practice tests with passing scores, and are beginning to lose interest or confidence?
Yeah, I think the main thing is tell them they're not alone. That this is not an uncommon problem for students, and you're not alone in this. And that this is something that we can continue to work on together. I can, if I were talking to that student, I might use my example of driver's license test. Now, I could always do the parts where you do the multiple choice. That was no problem. But sit in the car and have someone watch me drive, that was terrifying. Do you know how many times it took me to get my driver's license? How many tests? 4 times. So 4 times. So I failed 3 tests. So it's just sharing with them that this is not uncommon, encouraging not to give up, and that we'll work through it again, and helping them figure out ways to de-stress, try to figure out what parts of the actual situation is stressing them when they go to the test center. So trying to figure out a little bit more about what's stressing them when they go to the test center and how to address it. Okay. And then the other thing too to consider is if your state has another option than an HSE exam, such as national diploma, the national diploma program. So that might be NDP. You might want to look into that national diploma program, run by CASAS, by the way.
Great. Another question. How do you teach your students these strategies? How do you have students practice? How do you use activities or is the info delivered in a lecture format?
I usually have them do certain things practical. I try to, and this is where the work comes in. I try to find questions that are similar to, with doing this, similar to the type of test they're going to be taking. So for example, with CASAS, I was looking for for questions that were formulated in a similar way. So I may either develop the questions myself with passages, and you can do that in your own program. In our program, we did things like that, where everybody had to take a lesson and also develop questions to address different CASAS competencies. I also found that Future was good at finding, I was able to find questions in Future that were very similar to the way CASAS presented questions, so we would use that. So I would usually have a time at each class where what we did was we did 2 to 3 practice questions, and then we kind of debriefed what the answers were and why, and that kind of thing.
Great. Another question. What do you think about the advice to write down your thoughts about your stress before the testing, concluding with positive thoughts? I heard that there is research supporting this. Also, what about helping students appreciate the role of the fight or flight response so they can recognize their physical symptoms such as sweating, rapid response, heart rates as a normal reaction to a somewhat stressful situation?
I think those are both great ideas. So flight or fight, yes, and that's what we kind of hit on with the avoidance or whatever. I didn't get as, but introducing the flight or fight kind of thing to the students is helpful, can be helpful. I wouldn't get over technical with it. And then writing down and naming the stressors is often helpful for once you kind of put a name to it and you talk about what's bugging you, it often is really helpful.
Wonderful. Cynthia, we've got some other questions here, but I think one of them, people are asking about how to get a copy of the booklet. They're asking.
All those things are in the repository.
Okay, great.
The booklet, I did put in my email in the chat, but it's also on the slide. So you can email me about the booklet. It's $100. If you want to customize it for your program, it's $100. And I customize it for you. I give you a copy that you can just run off. You can run off 1, you can run off 1,000. It's up to you. Okay. Great. So I really appreciate you all coming today. And I'm going to put my email address in here again. So if you have more questions, please do reach out. I hope that you will all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.
Right. We just want to say thank you for attending, and also a special thank you to Cynthia, our presenter. And we hope to see you all at the next webinar. Thank you all so much. Bye now.
Bye. Bye. Thank you.